These are the note fillings for the integumentary system. I'm going to just give you a heads up, though you're going to have to fill in quite a bit, so I will try and talk slow enough, and that is highlighted is what you're going to fill in. Okay, the integumentary system includes your skin and associated structures such as your nails, hair, and glands. The word integument means covering. So, for instance, when we talked about the integument of the earthworm back in biology, that was the earthworm's outer covering. Skin. So there are several layers to the skin. The outermost layer is the epidermis. Epi means above, so it lies above the dermis. So that is the layer that you see. So it is made up of keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium, and it serves for protection. So it's the outer layer of keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium for protection. It consists of 4 layers for most of your skin and 5 layers when you include your palms and the soles of your feet. The epidermis is made up of several sublayers. The stratum basale is the deepest layer, so that's the layer you won't see. It is next to your dermis. It is a single layer of cells that are mostly columnar, and they're keratinocytes. And it's very mitotic, so this is where all the cells are made for your layers above. The new cells are pushed to the surface, and as they do so, their cytoplasm is replaced by keratin, which is a tough protein, and that makes the surface cells waterproof and protective. In this layer, you'll find melanocytes, which make up about 25% of this layer, and these are cells that produce a pigment called melanin that gives your skin color. Above the stratum basale is the stratum spinosum, so instead of writing the word stratum every time, you could just put S spinosum. This is your spiny layer. It is several layers thick with keratinocytes that are slightly flattened and irregular shaped. Macrophage cells called Langerhans cells are found here, and it is somewhat mitotic. Now, sometimes people put the stratum basale and the stratum spinosum together, and they collectively call them the stratum germinativum, which is the growing layer. So this is where cells are made. Next up is the stratum granulosum. This is a very thin layer of only 2 to 3 layers of cells that are flattened, where keratinization begins. It also contains Langerhans cells. And then the stratum lucidum is the clear layer. These cells contain no nucleus, and you only find these where your skin is thick, such as in the soles of your feet or the palms of your hand. And then then you have the stratum corneum. This is the outermost layer of epidermis, so when you look at somebody, you see their stratum corneum. It's about 20 to 30 layers thick of cells, and it makes up 3/4 of the epidermis. The cells are dead, and they are continually sloughed off. So every time you put on clothes or take a bath, you're washing off these cells. So that makes up the layers of the skin. Okay, the next layer in are the layers of the epidermis. The next layer in is called the dermis. This is a thicker layer, so it's thicker than the epidermis. It's mainly connective tissue of a gel-like matrix with collagen and elastic fibers and blood vessels. So if you cut yourself and you bleed, you are all the way through the epidermis, and now you're into the dermis. It has many nerve fibers and lymph vessels. This is where your oil and sweat glands are found, part of your hair follicles, and cutaneous receptors, which are receptors that can feel touch. It is composed of the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The thin papillary layer is mainly areolar or loose connective tissue with many blood vessels and contains free nerve endings which sense pain, and the Messner's corpuscles, which are for touch. The thicker reticular layer that makes up the dermis lies underneath the papillary layer and is composed of dense, regular connective tissue. So that's it for the dermis. And then the hypodermis is the lowest of the skin layers. It is the subcutaneous tissue beneath the skin. mainly loose or realer tissue, along with adipose or fat. It is attached to the skin. It attaches the skin to underlying muscle, and it's mainly for insulation. So those are your three main layers of the skin: the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. And then in the epidermis, we gave you this layers that make it up. Okay, skin color. Skin color is mainly due to three pigments. Melanin is produced by cells called melanocytes, because that word ending site means cell. Your freckles and moles are an accumulation of melanin. Increased sun exposure increases melanin production in an attempt to protect against UV radiation. So people that live where it's real sunny or close to the equator will have dark skin in an effort to protect them from stronger rays. Overexposure to the sun causes bunching of elastic fibers, which leads to a leathery skin appearance. So that's another reason you shouldn't be sunbathing all the time. It can also alter your DNA, leading to skin cancer. The next pigment is keratin. It is found in your stratum corneum and the adipose tissue. It is most obvious in the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands. And then the last pigment is hemoglobin. It gives skin a pinkish tint because of the oxygenated hemoglobin flowing through your capillaries. Caucasians have less melanin, so their transparent epidermis allows hemoglobin color to show through. Now let's talk a little bit about the derivatives of skin. So hair is a derivative. Its main function is for protection. It helps prevent heat loss from your scalp. So that's why in the winter you wear a hat on your head, especially if you're bald. Newborn baby's hair is called lanego. Smooth muscles called the arrector pili cause hair to stand up and form your goosebumps. Your nails are scale-like modifications of epidermis. They are filled with protein keratin that we mentioned earlier. Glands are also derivatives of skin. You have several types. Sweat are also called sudoriferous, and there are two types of sudoriferous or sweat glands. You have eccrine and you have apocrine. Apocrine are not connected to hair follicles, and they're most numerous in your palms and the soles of your feet. They produce sweat to cool your body down. Apocrine are connected to hair follicles. You mainly find them in your axilla, which is your armpit or your genital area. They secrete a thicker, milky substance, and the odor in that area is due to bacteria breaking down those secretions. Then you have sebaceous or oil glands. You find them everywhere except for the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. That's why the soles of your feet tend to get drier. They secrete sebum or oil, which is for softening, lubricating your hair, and then water loss prevention. Secretion of the sebaceous or oil glands is stimulated by sex hormones, so that's why when you are a kid, you don't have problems with your skin like acne, because your sebaceous glands aren't over-secreting. But when you hit puberty and your hormones start raging, one of the things they act on are these glands, and then it sometimes leads to problematic skin. Functions of the skin: obviously, it is for protection. It is a wonderful physical barrier to keep out bacteria. It also prevents water loss due to keratinization. You also excrete some waste, such as urea and then nitrogen-containing compounds through your sweat. It is involved in body temperature regulation. When your body temperature increases, or you can just put an arrow up, the dermal blood vessels will dilate, releasing more heat to the outside. When external body temperature decreases, the dermal blood vessels will constrict, causing warm blood to bypass your skin layer and it goes to your internal organs to keep the inside of your body warm. And then cutaneous sensation, which is the sensation of touch, contains nerve receptors for touch, pressure, and pain. And then the last function is vitamin D synthesis. So cholesterol in your skin is converted to vitamin D when exposed to UV radiation. The vitamin D then travels throughout your body and is involved in calcium metabolism. Okay, let's talk just a tiny bit about homeostatic imbalances of skin. Okay, burns. Burns can be very problematic. They cause a loss of body fluids that are rich in proteins and electrolytes that can result in dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. They can also alter the metabolism. People that are burn victims tend to need a higher caloric intake to build proteins that are lost. And a very important homeostatic imbalance is when you burn yourself, you set your body up for infection because you've removed that outer layer or you've damaged that outer layer of protection. So let's talk a little bit about burns. A primary burn or first degree, so you can either write the word primary or put 1 degree. It affects only the epidermis. It shows up as localized redness, swelling, and pain, and it usually will heal in anywhere from 1 to 3 days. Then you have secondary burns. This damages the epidermis and the dermis, so it's epidermal and dermal damage. You have the same symptoms from above, so you'll have redness, swelling, pain, but you'll also have blistering. So anytime you have a blister, you have a second-degree burn, and it usually heals in 1 to 3 weeks. The most serious is the third-degree burn. It will affect all skin layers, so it's going to affect your epidermis, your dermis, and your hypodermis. The area will appear as gray, white, or black. There's little or no edema or swelling. It will destroy, or it can destroy, your nerve endings, so therefore it's not painful, and it usually will require a skin graft. Okay, you're going to be doing a project on, or a pamphlet on skin cancer, and by the way, that cannot be handwritten. You're going to type it on the computer, make sure your pamphlet folds properly. You'll pull diagrams or whatever you're going to put on it from the internet, so you're not going to hand cut or hand write on your pamphlet. Okay, and you need to include information, not this information I'm giving you. You need to look up and find some more thorough information. Okay, skin cancer. So there are several types. One is called basal cell carcinoma. It is the least malignant, meaning it's less likely to spread, and the most common. It most often appears on the face as a shiny, raised area. It is slow growing and it very seldom metastasizes, which means it very seldom will spread. Then you have squamous cell carcinoma. It arises from your stratum spinosum. It appears as scaly, red, elevated areas. It grows rapidly and metastasizes to adjacent lymph nodes if not removed. And then the most serious is malignant melanoma. It is a cancer of your melanocytes. It is fairly rare but can be deadly. It can develop wherever there is pigment. So you can develop on your external skin, you could develop in your anal canal, you could develop, it doesn't have to be just what is exposed to the sun. Most develop spontaneously but can develop from a mole. So you need to always do a mole check if you have moles that are extremely dark, way darker than any others. That's one thing that you need to be aware of. It can be spreading brown to black patches that metastasize to lymph nodes and blood vessels. Okay, I know that was a lot of information. I probably went through it way too fast, but hopefully you can go back and replay it. I hope to see you guys in class soon. Thank you.